Welcome to Networking RX, a podcast devoted to helping business professionals like you enhance your networking skills in order to become more proficient giving and receiving quality business referrals and improving the overall quality of your life and the lives of those around you. The Networking RX podcast is a production of AmSpirit Business Connections, an organization whose mission is to empower business success through networking.
Last month, I released episode 748. It came out on the 23rd of October, and it featured Bob Berg, Jeff West, and Kim Angeli. Bob had been on my podcast before. Bob was actually my 100th episode, the whole story behind that, and I guess we'll call it struck up a friendship, or we're acquainted with each other. Be that as it may. But one of the things, I'm a fan of Bob. He's the author of The Go-Giver, and there's a whole series of Go-Giver books out there. The Go-Giver, Go-Givers Sell More, Go-Giver, The Go-Giver Leader, The Go-Giver Influencer. He has other books that predated that series as well. And he and Jeff West have come out with a book also. At any rate, one of the things that has come from my interaction, my acquaintance with Bob, is I've subscribed to his daily impact newsletter. I don't want to call it a newsletter. It's really short. It's quick. It's easy to digest. I'm going to put a link as to how you can subscribe to it. I highly recommend it. I'm a big fan of less is more. Less is more. If you're somebody out there and you're doing a monthly newsletter, you might consider taking that down to shorter weekly stuff, or maybe even just daily bite-sized stuff, because those are the things that get read. And I get Bob's Daily Impact email every day, and I'll read them all. They don't all resonate with me, as some more than others, but it's quick, bite-sized sorts of things. And anyhow, recently I got one from Bob, and I'll just read you a part of it. He says, the question is often asked, how can I add value to another person's life upon meeting them? And he goes on to say, after all, you don't even know them. And then he shares, that's probably the easiest thing to do. And it is. And I'll reveal what he has to say here in a minute. But that's the holy grail of being successful with respect to networking, building relationships, personal relationships, professional relationships, adding value to other people. You stop and think about the personal relationships you have in your life, not your kids who are dependent upon you. Well, I guess you add tons of value to them. But your spouse moving along when you propose to them, or just maybe it's a significant other, they are tethered to you. They are in your gravitational pull, if you will, because of the value you bring them. My wife and I are together because the value that we bring one another. We each have different strengths. We each have our own weaknesses. We complement each other. We bring value to one another. And if you stop and think about the people who are in your life, those people are there because you somehow, some way bring value to them, and vice versa. That's the gravitational pull of relationships. It's just bringing value to other people, plain and simple. And so that often begs the question of, well, how do I bring value to other people? And I responded to Bob's email, and I basically said, that when this is a big problem with respect to individuals out there, because when they hear the notion of bringing value to others, adding value to others, they immediately conjure up in their mind these images of magnanimous acts that, and I told him, I said, would make Mother Teresa proud, LOL. And they can't settle on something. Geez, what's that thing I can do, Where's that burning bus where I can just rescue kids from and add value to the world? Where's that huge thing? I can't think of that huge thing. and then they move on and don't try and add value to other people. And what Bob goes on to share in his email is that adding value to others is probably the easiest thing to do. Through a smile, I'm quoting, through a smile or kind word, or by asking questions that communicate your sincere, genuine, and authentic interest in them as a human being. He goes on to share, in other words, nothing special is required, but then he follows up with, well, wait a minute, it is special because it's special to them. It's not special to us necessarily. It may not seem like a big deal that we walk into a room and smile at somebody who's having a bad day. We might not even know them, right? Or having a kind word for somebody. I really like that outfit. That really makes your eyes pop, or whatever it is. It may, and obviously it has to be genuine. You can't just be making things up just to hear yourself talk. But to the extent that you are willing to do these things, these are small little things. They're big in other people's worlds. They're really big in other people's worlds. In fact, in my book, Foundational Networking, I devote a whole section to what I call altruism. It's actually the second section in the book. And the premise and foundational networking, I won't go through the whole book, is that to be successful networking, you need to have a foundation of things. One is your presence in the world, and the second is, well, the third is integrity, but the second is altruism. And in there, in the altruism section, I go through and I talk about various acts of altruism. And I never mention money. Because, yeah, that's always the easy one. Again, people conjure up these images of, dropping down a credit card or writing a check, with lots of zeros on it, and that's adding value. But some of the things I talk about in there, and again, I'm not going to go through the whole thing. Get the book. Because there's stories in there and a better explanation, or a more detailed explanation, I should say. But things like compassion, sharing compassion with people. People around us are having tough times. They always will. Even when things are going well, there'll be a little dip in that, and that's a tough time, and you kind of need to be there for them. Or people people lose loved ones. Encouragement, just being encouraging to other people. I talk about smiles. I talk about volunteerism. I talk about that at pretty much any podcast I get on. That one of the things you can do to add value to the world is just volunteer. It doesn't have to be anything great. You don't need to be president of an organization or be the founder of an organization. Just get on a committee and roll up your sleeves and do something. Giving others compliments, sharing your appreciation with other people, just having that little gratitude interlude. Every day, I've got some franchisees, and that's what every week they're reaching out to somebody. Hey, I really appreciate you. Appreciate you being in the organization. I appreciate your leadership. I appreciate the introduction. It doesn't necessarily have to be members they're reaching out to, but just sharing that appreciation. Giving someone your attention. Somebody wanting to call, needing a sympathetic ear. They're not looking for answers necessarily. They're just looking for somebody to listen. That's part of marital relationships or relationships with significant others. Just they know your hopes, they know your dreams, and they know when they've kind of fallen by the wayside. One that I put in there is what I call gracious receipt, and I can go and I can go into more detail in future episodes on every one of these things. When I started a podcast, I figured that's what I would do. And to be honest, I never have. I figured I would pick each one of these chapters apart, and I never have. I've had so much other material and so many other people to talk to. But gracious receipt is just being open to receiving from other people. That's the other half of giving, is being willing to receive. And I talk in that chapter about when we're open to help other people helping us, it gives them the joy of adding value. As strange as that might sound, thoughtfulness, Making personal introductions. Oh my gosh, people tell me they don't have anything to give to the world. I just have to chuckle because often the biggest thing that we can contribute to other people is our network itself. Just making introductions. I had a conversation last week with somebody that probably haven't talked to in 6 months. I see her posts on LinkedIn, very entertaining, very insightful. No, we're just, hey, let's catch up. We've both been busy, both been, climbing our own little mountain of success together. And we just got catching up. And she said a couple things, and she's told me a little bit about what's going on with her husband. And right away, it's like, oh, I've got a person to introduce you to, and I've never met your husband. I've got somebody he should meet. Didn't cost me anything but 10 minutes to craft a couple emails and copy and paste in some LinkedIn URLs. Pretty simple thing to do to add value. Where's that going to go? I don't know. But I know it's going to go further than if I hadn't done it at all. And the last thing I talk about is just what I call unsolicited generosity. Just do things for people. Don't wait for them to ask. You don't need to, if your spouse has to tell you to give them flowers, it takes all the joy out of it. You sneak up and you just do things for people. You don't even necessarily have to know them. So I'll put in the show notes a link so you can subscribe to Bob's Daily Impact newsletter, we'll call it. It's not very long. Subscribe to it. That's a way to add value to Bob. I guess it's a way to add value to me. I don't know if Bob will listen to this, but he'll know that I set that in motion. And if he doesn't, that's okay too. I don't keep score. He doesn't keep score. But the point is, it's easy for you to add value to other people. It's easy for you to add value to other people. It's really as simple as taking the time to smile, say a kind word, asking a question, being interested in other people. It's really that simple. Act on it today.
Thanks for joining us on the Networking RX podcast. Please put what you've learned into action today and let us know if you have questions, comments, or ideas for future topics. You can email them to us at podcast@amspirit.com. That's AMSPIRIT.com. Finally, so you never miss an episode, be sure to subscribe to the Networking RX podcast through iTunes, Overcast, or however you receive your podcasts. Now get out and network with someone.
The Networking RX podcast is the copyright production of AmSpirit Business Connection. All rights reserved.